Hi, everyone. I'm Edwin Rutsch, Director of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and I've been working for about 14 years on the topic of empathy. How do we create a more empathic society and world? And today I'm so happy to be here with Dani Rius. And Dani is has spent 15 years in the corporate training industry, as I understand it, and is now working on empathy and business leadership, and has written this book, Mindful Empathy. And for the next generation of great leaders, the mindset of success. And you've got two people with flashlights here, which I think is a great metaphor for empathy, kind of shining empathy, attention and awareness. So thank you for joining me, Dani, on this for this discussion.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to the interview.
Oh, great. Well, do you want to say anything else in terms of introduction, like just introducing yourself? Anything else you'd like to share?
Yes. My area of really big interest has been for a long time now, for about 10 years, to apply mindfulness to my everyday life. And I've seen the effects that it has also on my coaching clients. So I coach people and through developing their own personal leadership. So that's what I've been doing in the more recent years, 5 to 6 years now. And I'm working also with people with intellectual disabilities part-time. And that has given me also new insight into how to use empathy, really connecting mindfully with people as well. So there's that connection of mindfulness and empathy, and I will be talking a lot about mindfulness as a tool to become aware of how to become more empathic, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I have seen that from your book. You know, it is mindful empathy. So it is there's sort of the mindfulness community and empathy community, and you're looking at the two, you know, how they interact. So maybe we could just get started. Like, where did your interest, I don't know which came first, interest in mindfulness or empathy, but what kind of piqued that interest in each of those topics?
Well, it was empathy. And I remember when I was very young, and this really explains a lot of why I do what I do today. When I was very young, I was even born overseas. I lived in many different countries, so I had to adapt to places, to people, to different norms of behavior, different codes, and I had to observe. And part of being empathic is really about observing, isn't it? It's about seeing what others are doing and then smiling back if they're smiling, or if someone is frowning, then you kind of mirror back what they're experiencing, right? And many times I didn't know the language, so I had to learn the language by observing and by being there in school. And every year the same thing. I had to change again, school, town, city, or country, and learn sometimes a new language. And that's where I learned to empathize, through that observation and through that reflecting back and understanding what meaning people were giving depending on how they were feeling. Because I could only tell whether something was good or bad by their expressions and not by the words they were saying. And I had to develop those empathic skills to survive socially, emotionally. And I remember that sometimes it was difficult. It really got challenging. And then my mother would teach me. I mean, my mother was my other great teacher. She was very empathetic and very compassionate. And so she would say, yeah, you have to empathize with people. So I was very young, very young.
She actually used that term, empathy?
Yes, she used the term. And she actually, and it's funny, she studied psychology in the United States, because that's one of the countries I lived in as very young, for a very long time, actually, till I was 10. And so she had studied psychology, so she would say, yeah, you need to empathize with people. And the thing is, I didn't learn how to empathize through adults who knew more, or, I didn't know exactly what it was. And so I thought it was that what in the book we explain it, Wayne explains this part. He did a PhD in empathy specifically. So he explains there's affective or emotional empathy. And that one's all good, but that's just the start. You want to work towards the cognitive, so understanding, and then towards the compassionate empathy, which is what we really want to achieve, is to have that compassion for others as well. But that means also to be compassionate with yourself. And I just didn't know how to be compassionate because I was always looking outside. I was looking for cues.
So you were kind of more aware of other people and not really being sensitive to what was going on inside of yourself. And you're trying to navigate all these new different places. Sounds like maybe you moved, you had to start school again, had to make new friends, and that required that you kind of be sensitive to kind of these new environments. And is that sort of what you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it was really about trying to see what others were feeling, and that would bring about feelings in me sometimes, right? But I felt that I needed to shut down. That was the part that was not all right. And so I developed lots of anxiety. And it was only through mindfulness about, well, more than 10 years now, 11 or 12 years now, that I started understanding more about the human brain, how we think, how it influences our emotions. And I studied a lot. I mean, I studied education, where you study social psychology and psychology, applied psychology, and counseling, and a whole bunch of things that really were trying to tell me how I need to understand myself as a human being. And through mindfulness, I also understood people better as well.
So you're, what
I had
I'm
a
hearing
very
there.
fragmented.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
I had a very fragmented education. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So you had a fragmented education because I'm hearing you had some anxieties. You were sort of focusing on other people, and then you're kind of doing this study, and it was all self-study on how to deal with your own sort of awareness of what's going on with yourself and the anxiety. Maybe can I ask, where did you go? Where were all these different places that you mentioned the United States? Where in the United States? I'm just curious. You mentioned a lot of different places. Where were they?
Well, I was born in Denmark, and then I was very briefly in Russia, and then from Russia to the United States. All this as a baby. Okay, that was all in 3 months. And then I stayed in the States. I was in Buenos Aires in Argentina. That's where I'm originally from. My parents are from. And I was back in the United States. So first I was in New York, and then I was in Maryland. My dad was working in Washington, D.C. And I went back to Argentina I'm getting you bored probably by now, but.
No, I love these journeys. I can tell my story of travels. So I find it interesting.
Yeah, and then I was in Germany. First I was in Munich, and then I was in Frankfurt. I was thinking other way around. Gosh, that's been a long time ago. First in Munich, and then in Frankfurt. And the changing all the time was also because for some reason I was also changed schools. I would change schools very often. So maybe I was in the same city, but it was first a private school, then a public school. First an American school or an international school, then it was a German school. So there was always some kind of change. So even if it wasn't that many countries, it was 3. It was just coming back and forth.
And each time you're having to connect with make friends, find other people to connect with, sort of navigate the cultures and the relationships and yeah. So then that's kind of where you became sensitive, that empathic sensitivity. And then how is it with the mindfulness? Where did the mindfulness kind of
Sorry,
You're getting a bit of
the
light there.
sunshine
So
is coming.
they're in New Zealand, where you've ended up now. We just didn't
Yes.
mention that you ended up in New Zealand, in Christchurch at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And here it's 8 a.m. or 8 something. Yeah, a.m. Yeah. And I was in Canada before in the UK. So
Oh,
actually, life didn't end there. That was just when I was young that I was talking about. So sorry, what was the question?
oh yeah. So you're just going through all the places. I mean, that's quite a lot of places already. It sounds like there's even more too that you went to. So,
Eight
okay.
countries, four
Good.
continents. Eight
Or,
countries, four continents.
and your mother would talk about empathy, say, be the importance of empathy. So you kind of learned that
Yeah.
from her, but it was sort of
Mhm.
an outside empathy versus really connecting with
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. So I was always taught how to be empathic with others, to treat everyone with the same respect. It didn't matter, what level, because we even got to, well, my dad was a diplomat, so we even got to meet presidents and ambassadors and artists, famous artists like Astor Piazzolla. You might have come across his name. He's very famous as a jazz player, jazz tango player, and then the cleaner, the mechanic, and treat everyone the same way. And why would you treat everyone the same way? Well, because you need to be empathic, right? Everyone is valued for being a person. It doesn't really matter what the title is. And so that is a big empathy learning. And I think now I remember your question was about mindfulness, how that came
Mhm.
about. That came about 12 years ago that we had the Christchurch earthquakes here. It was 11 years ago. And that was a big shake, a big shake, right? Emotionally, the world feels like it's coming down, right? The floor is literally moving. So I had a small child. I had recently arrived to Christchurch, New Zealand. So it was really a big emotional hit. And in that moment, I found by chance, or maybe not by chance, right? I found it was a student event at the beginning of the year, and they were showing their different clubs, and one of them was about meditation. I said, okay, I've heard many times that meditation is really good for anxiety. Let's go and try it out. And so I did, and I never left. I keep meditating, I keep going to lessons, so I still learn more about wisdom apart from just meditation, right? So how to connect with our human sense, our inner peace, which is really lovely. And that is what made the difference. No medications that I had taken in the past, no psychotherapy or psychology, nothing could really help with anxiety to really cut through the root of it, but learning meditation. So that's where, and meditation is really a mindfulness practice. And that's where I got passionate, because I've not only applied it to myself, but then I apply it with my clients. And they find it also very useful to themselves. And especially if they're high performers, people who are self-critical, it's really, it really helps to calm, soothe, and then make a decision, for instance. But I'm going to stop there because I know how Empathy Circle works, and I think you want to give me there a little
Oh,
bit of a summary, and that's a
yeah.
lot. So
Well, we weren't really doing a formal empathy circle here. Usually, it does relate with one of the practices, maybe people don't know, that I found is very effective, or I think it's the best sort of first step gateway practice for learning empathy, is that in small groups of, ideally 4, we do active listening or empathic listening, where one person speaks, they select who they're going to speak to it, and the listener, the active listener, reflects back or recaps their understanding of what the speaker said, to where the speaker feels like they've really been feel like they've been heard and understood to their satisfaction. And then we go around and we usually set a time limit, 5 minutes, and then we shift, who was the listener becomes the speaker, and they select someone to speak to. And then we go around in that process. And it sort of ties in with what you're talking about, that you were empathic, listening, and sensitive, it sounds like, to other people, seeing and hearing them, being attentive, no matter what their class was, that you had that sense of sort of equality in terms of seeing the humanity of everyone. But it sounds like you maybe felt like you were not really being seen and understood to your satisfaction. So it's sort of this one-way empathy of going out. And a lot of people complain about that, say, well, I go listen to everybody, but nobody listens to me. And that can certainly, I don't know if that was how it was for you. It creates anxiety because you're not being seen and understood. And, I imagine it creates a sense of disconnection, loneliness, and yeah. So I don't know if that kind of fits. So I think
you got it. That's the thing. It's loneliness is the big one. Because you're not feeling heard, you feel lonely, and that's been a theme for such a long time. Yeah. You hit it in the nail.
Yeah. So that's why for me, when I talk about empathy, for me, it's about the mutuality or a culture of empathy or relational empathy. A lot of times the definition is they just say, oh, it's you, feeling somebody else, sensing into, but that's only half of the coin. It's a relationship. And I frame empathy within that relationship, because I think that's healthier and it has more equality, and everybody's getting seen and heard, not just, you as the individual got to go do it for everybody else and sacrifice yourself, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely, and that's why I loved the empathy circles. I've attended a couple of your empathy circles, and I found it really useful as a first step, as you say, and everyone feeling heard. That's totally true. If only some get a go and they're speaking, and that's what happens also in groups, right? You're in a group, and then one speaks and takes over and speaks a lot, and then the other speaks a little, and then somebody doesn't speak at all. And that's what I find is disempowering to those who don't. And as a facilitator, when I facilitate workshops, I'll try my best, because some people just won't speak, and that you have to respect that if they don't want to speak. But I'll try to give everyone a go, give everyone that opportunity to speak. And that's why there's also, like smaller group activities, so that they can, at least, maybe they don't want to speak in a large group. That's a little intimidating. But what about speaking with just one or two? It's really important for everyone to have a say. That's so much more empowering.
Yeah, so you try to create a space where everyone can feel heard and understood. And it sounds like you're doing trainings and workshops where that is supported. And that's what I like about the empathy circle as a gateway first step training, is that mutuality, again, which I've said before. And I was wondering, kind of what came up to me is the mindfulness, the reason you got interested in mindfulness is that you were able to sort of focus on yourself, what's going on in you, versus sort of being just out listening to others. I'm just wondering if I'm just speculating here.
No, I didn't think about it at all. I knew that I was tremendously anxious. I had a baby. I didn't know how to how to educate a child. I was an older mom, and nobody had taught me how to be a mother. I mean, nobody really teaches you how to be a mother, but you usually or very often have family around, or you've seen people educate small children. I had not seen it. I had traveled all over, so I didn't grow up with an auntie with my niece or nephew. So I didn't have any role models. And there I was, and then plus the earthquakes, and I was totally isolated because I had recently arrived. So I didn't have friendships yet. I wasn't working yet. And what could I do? I had to get something, and it wasn't going to be medication. I never liked the idea of medication. And I knew that medication didn't work because medication can be for depression, for low mood, to regulate, or I'm not going to get into details because that's not my area. But anxiety is really, you can't give someone with anxiety necessarily an antidepressant because it just doesn't work. If you lower, because what happens, and I speak from my experience, right? What happens is that it lowers your energy levels. So you feel like you can't really get up, for instance. And it almost, for me, it gave the contrary result. It was like, okay, now I'm really getting depressed. Right? Antidepressant, it was like a depressant to me. And that's because it wasn't for anxiety. And that's what they very often give. So I actually work with people nowadays who have high anxiety, and then help them work through the root cause of their anxiety. And through that, they can little by little get off medication and feel so much happier. I mean, I catch up after half a year and, off medication, happy, the ups and downs is usual in life with difficulties, but they know how to get themselves up. And that is through meditation practices. So it is something that does protect you, but I can't say necessarily that I got into it because of that. I think it was more of a result of what can I do? And that turned out to be a very useful tool.
Well, what is it about the meditation for you that what happens if you're feeling anxiety and you're meditating? What's sort of the dynamics there? How does the meditation help with anxiety?
It helps because you calm yourself. What makes us anxious are our thoughts, not our external reality necessarily. I mean, yes, okay, there are things that seem to be more pleasant. If somebody gives you a gift, that can be very pleasant. An earthquake is not very pleasant, or a fire, or you got hurt, you've got a cast because you broke your leg. Those are not very pleasant things, you could think. Those are external circumstances that can make it harder. But through meditating, what you do is you get out of your head and come into your heart.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not thinking about things, because what makes things worse is when you think about them. So you hurt yourself and it's like, oh, I hurt myself. Little kids, I love to use the example of kids because it's so clear, so raw. You see a little kid cutting their hand and they look at it. And then because they see blood, they start crying. And it gets really loud. They didn't cry before, so it didn't really hurt, but they see blood and they cry. It's like, oh, something happened to me. So it's the thought that kicks in that makes us sad, desperate, nervous, fearful, jealous. It's the thought that makes us that way. It's not the external reality, because not everyone reacts the same way. Some people are quite okay. Others can't deal with it. And I had a really good friend here, my best friend. She left after the earthquakes. The family just couldn't take it. So, and others stayed, others moved, others came back. There's different responses. So evidently it's not external, it's internal. So what you do is you get rid of all those thoughts, and then you connect. So you close your eyes. That's the best way, but you can do it just looking at a spot in front, low, and where there's not any movement. So you can really focus. And then you get into, there are different techniques, right? It can be just the breath, but it is definite that you're going to focus on one thing And when you have those thoughts coming up again, you focus on that one thing. You have thoughts, you focus on that one thing. And then at some point, because you're just focused on that one thing, and a neutral thing, of course, like the breath, right? It's neutral. And then you can relax because you've cleared your mind, right? So instead of having that brain filled with things, which could be even filth, yeah, you're filled with worry and criticizing people. That's something that we love to do. Yeah. And if we just calm that mind, then we open up space, and that's when we can listen to people better. That's when we can see what's going on with us. And that has helped me really relax, not take things seriously, like as seriously, because they're not. Why am I so important? I'm not that important. But because I see things through my eyes, I feel I'm important. And that happens with each and every one of us. We feel so important. That's where conflict happens, because it's like, no, that's my place, right?
Yeah, so what I'm getting there is it's getting into the felt experience, maybe the feeling, the sensations in the body, being aware of that, like the breath, and focusing on that, versus getting into thoughts. Sounds like rumination or thinking of judgments, or just all the thinking process, and getting kind of stuck in that thinking process. And the meditation helps move you to more of a felt experience and in the body. So that's kind of the essence of it that I'm understanding.
Yeah, you can't see it as a body sensation. Body sensations are definitely, there's others that are just try to scan your body and feel the tension, and you go from the top to the bottom, or the bottom to the top, right, of your body. There are different kinds. I gave the example of a breathing meditation, but then there's others. There's others like a beautiful one is connecting with a mind of love, right? So you feel love, so you try to think about something that makes you feel love, right? Maybe it's a puppy, it's like, oh, right, and you feel that love, and then you connect with that, and you stay just with that, with the sensation of love. That's all.
Well, it is sensation, right? You're focusing on some bodily sensation. So that if you're thinking of love in a puppy, you've got the warmth. So you're sort of focusing your awareness on that sensation. If you're thinking of the breath, you're focusing on the sensation. Like, it's not like you're, I don't know if that, if you tell me if I'm wrong,
connected, right?
yeah,
it's no, you're not wrong. It's because I hadn't thought about it that exact way, but yes, you're right, because it's body mind connection. We are connected. It's and I have an image in the book that shows that process, thought, and then you have an emotion and a body sensation, and then the feeling, right? It's all connected, and we go from one to another. We think we're rational beings, but we're actually not that rational, because the more rational you think you are, and trying to disconnect from any kind of emotion, the more incongruent you are with who you are, and with life, and with people. You're just totally disconnected.
Well, I just did an empathy circle a couple of months ago on what does reason feel like. So it's like, even when we're reasoning, there is a felt experience. So what people might consider reason. So I think that, because empathy, I think, is the felt experience is important, since it is to feel into, right? With empathy, it is about those felt sensitivity to the felt experience of self and others. So I think that aspect, at least for me, of the feeling part is really important. And another thing, you're talking about anxiety. What I find is the way I deal with it, at least in an empathy circle, I find if I can share it, I can say, oh, I'm feeling anxious right now. And then I say it to the person that's listening to me, and they say, oh, I hear you feel anxious right now. That sharing of it and putting it out into the world and getting it reflected back actually starts calming me down. It's like it mixes the self anxiety with a sense of connection. Yeah, there's a feeling of connection with somebody else, and they're hearing me, and that helps melt it away. So I see the relational empathy circle as one way of addressing that anxiety. So I don't know what you think about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you about the experience, or one of the experiences I had in the empathy, in one of your empathy circles. And it was 4 of us, I believe. Yeah, it's always 4, right? Yeah,
Usually,
or mostly.
3, 4, 5, maybe 6. Most 4 is ideal.
Yeah. So maybe it was 4, maybe it was 6, but in any case, we all had to go. And I remember that everyone was starting very as a matter of fact, and this is what I do, and this is what's coming up for me, but very, very much on the head level. And then there was this lady who I just love. She just broke into there. I'm feeling very nervous, and oh, this is the first time. And with all that body language as well, that you could see she was really, really having a hard time. And we all from then on only spoke about how we felt, and that we were also a little nervous or nervous. And so everyone took that, and that came in the second circle. It was all about our emotions. And she started to relax, and everyone started to relax. And it's so important, actually, yes, to connect. Now, of course, I immediately think of my past when I had to go to diplomatic functions, and that was terrible, because that was at least that's how it seemed to me, right? And that's how I was also taught. You have to be, straight and proper and smile, and so it almost felt fake, but it was pretty much that fake it until you make it, because then it just started to become very natural. But you would not talk about feelings. The same as in public speaking, you do not necessarily say, "Oh, here, guys, I'm nervous," and then you give this wonderful speech. No, you're all ready to go, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes you can't have that luxury, I guess, but it is definitely, if you want to break the ice, that's definitely the way to go. Is try to pick up cues of how people are feeling and just go along with it. I think that's really wonderful. It's a wonderful tool to empathize. And in coaches, psychologists, nurses, doctors, and so forth, people who work with people who are either vulnerable or having a hard time, or whatever reason, you need to empathize. That's where you'll want to do it, right? But it's so important to be able to do as human beings.
Well,
so important.
Yeah, in terms of my feelings, I have a feeling of curiosity. I'm like wondering, who is Dani? What's her view on empathy? Like, what insights does she have? And so that's my kind of feeling, is kind of a curiosity about what you've learned about empathy. And especially, I haven't talked much about mindfulness, and sometimes there's sort of the mindfulness compassion community, which I see is a bit different than the empathy communities. Mindfulness tends to be on meditation, you go sit on your pillow or whatever. And I tend to see empathy as more, for me, as more of a relational, kind of being in relationship with others. And sometimes I kind of have problems. It's like the compassion community are some of the biggest critics of empathy. They come out and they have all these critical things like, oh, empathy is so terrible and stuff. So I don't know if you've come across that. A lot of articles like, oh, empathy is bad, compassion's good. So it seems like almost like a competition,
Well, that's coming from a judgmental mind, isn't it?
Mm.
That's what I love about mindful empathy. It's really non-judgmental. And that's the basis of it. I mean, when you see the model, which would be lovely if I could have had it prepared and show.
I have the
But
book. I don't know what page it was on, but
it's I think it's
oh, is
160.
that the one, the thought feeling one?
That's
No.
the one I spoke about before,
Oh,
but the mindful empathy one, and I don't know if you can see much here.
oh,
Um,
uh-huh.
See, so you have
Okay.
at the bottom, it's no judgment, right? So right here in the middle is where you have no judgment.
We're not hearing you because you're
Mindfulness,
speaking. It says no judgment. Is that what you
it's
said?
just yeah, it's no judgment. So
Mm-hmm.
when it meets in the middle, it's exactly that point where you don't have judgment. When you can reach that mindful empathy, right? Because empathy can, there are different types of empathy, right? And compassionate empathy, remember I said at the beginning, is what you really want to reach. Um, to be more mindful of yourself, so connect it with yourself, but also connect it with others, because empathy is something that you need to learn, and it's not necessarily a right or wrong or anything. We're on a path, we're learning things as we go as human beings, so we just want to be better, right? But if we can be better as human beings and connect from being mindful of both others and yourself,
I see.
that's where you're not taking any judgment. We're all on the path somewhere, and we've all done bad things. We've all done the wrong thing. We've all said the wrong thing. We've hurt people. And I remember I thought I was so pure and perfect when I was young. But that also gave me pride because I thought it was so pure. And pride is not such a good thing, especially when others might feel that you are that you feel superior to them, and then they'll go away, and then you wonder, as a proud person, why you're lonely, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's really having that non-judgmental mind. I'm not superior. You're not superior. We're equals, but also embodying it, because you can think about it rationally, and that's the thing. I would be very rational about things, and rationally it was great, but because I wasn't connecting with my heart to what I thought, that's where I was making mistakes, and I didn't even know. I wasn't aware. Like, why is somebody not speaking to me? Why is somebody not answering the phone? Well, maybe I said something that they felt offensive or that hurt them, and I would just never know. Okay, so many years later, I learned about mindfulness and how to connect with myself as a human being and realize, okay, actually, yeah, now I can see. I did have pride. I did think I was superior. I did think that I knew better. And when you're in that position, you're going to try to trample on others to get what you want. And
So
that's where the whole work environment can get
mhm.
pretty
Mhm.
difficult. And that's what I was particularly interested in, the work environment.
So I see. So you're sort of using mindfulness as how I would use self-empathy. So for me, there's a component of sort of this model that I'm using for kind of the empathy is sort of a relational empathy. It's a larger framework of us being in a relationship and the level of empathy between us, and also the level, the quality of being sensitive to my own felt experience, and you being, which I would consider self-empathy. So it sounds like that sense of self, what's happening in me, or that my own felt experience, you'd be calling that mindfulness, being sensitive to your own inner experiences. Is that, do you think, is that
Well, it is being
fair?
fully present. It
Mm-hmm.
is so there is something about that. Yes, it's being fully present. And through opening, again, it's about getting out of your head and into your heart, right? So yeah, you're right. It's that feeling that you said as well. And if you're connected with yourself, then that makes really all the difference. So you did it, it doesn't matter what words you use. It's really about getting into the right path, if you wish, right? So that's why I think being so open and non-judgmental really provides so much more, so much richness and less conflict, because you're open to other people, other ideas.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Well,
like that you see it as self-empathy. Yeah. As long as you're really connecting and being totally present with yourself, um, it's really good to have a moment to connect with yourself, maybe at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, and so that you remind yourself to stay connected. And that's the mindfulness piece. It's
yeah.
stay connected, stay present, open your view. Try to have a 360-degree view instead of your narrow, I don't know, 45 view. Right?
Getting sort of a focused, concentrated attention and awareness that maybe has judgment and ruminations and all those other sort of dynamics in it, that stay sort of open and aware of yourself and the environment, is kind of what I'm hearing there.
And I mean, if you do that experience, for instance, or like an exercise, right? You're going around and say you've got this group like in a workshop, right? And then each one is presenting themselves, right? They're introducing themselves. And by the time you're somewhere in the middle, or maybe each and every one, and I've experienced it myself, right? Instead of listening to the other person and how they're introducing themselves, you're like, oh, what am I going to say? And how am I going to introduce myself? And how am I going to look well? And,
Yeah, I do that.
You're not present. You're not present right then and there. And that's where having a moment before you begin the day, or for me, it's having a moment before I meet a client, is okay. Get all the ideas out of my head. Breathe out. Okay, now I'm connected. Now I'm fully present, right? But I mean, it takes practice, right? So for some, it will be at first, and I mean, at first, it would take me ages to get to that concentrated point, but it does build up, right? So if you have like 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 10 minutes, right? 20 minutes, relax. You've got a thought, okay, no, let's let it go. I'm not going to follow it. I'm not going to answer back. Here I am, connect again. This is present. Oh, yeah. Do I hear things around? So open your perception and get rid of your beliefs, your criticism, your judgments, because that's not going to let you listen to others and really be there with them and empathize.
Yeah, so I'm hearing there's one way of sort of having that self-connection is using those mindfulness practices to connect with what's happening in your body, to be able to be focused. I imagine creates calmness. The empathy, another approach is the relational, which I would say is the empathy circle. In the empathy circle, when it's like you can say anything you want, for example, it's like it's free speech, free emotions, whatever emotions. So someone can be judgmental. We're not saying don't be judgmental, but you be judgmental, say, oh, you're an idiot, but then the listener says, oh, I hear you say that I'm an idiot, that I'm stupid or something. Is there more? Right? So you're only reflecting that, and that empathic meeting the judgment with empathy kind of starts transforming it. So that's another sort of approach. It's the empathic, hearing the person, being present with it, transforms that judgment and whatever feelings are arising, and sort of starts building a relationship apart. So so those are some. So there's a lot of different techniques and processes for how do we sort of nurture that that mindful or empathic or self-empathic way. So I'm making a plug there for the empathy circle, just how
Yes.
that kind of fits. Yeah.
Yes, I hear that. Yeah, I think it would have some merit to have one moment to add, let's just connect. Let's have this, if I've seen this, and I've got feedback as well from clients of mine who, if they're stuck in criticism and no, we're going to do this, no, we're going to do that, or no, I don't agree, and don't come to any agreement. It's like, okay, let's stop. Let's take 10 minutes and meditate. And then everyone goes into meditation. And then things are miraculously, or not so miraculously, they're solved.
Mm-hmm.
So I find to be even more effective, especially if you have a short period of time, say, okay, let's take 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then let's start. And then people communicate more from their heart from the very beginning. That's my challenge.
Okay. Well, you had mentioned at the beginning that at the end we could do some kind of a meditation. Did you want to try something in closing?
Something easy, right? Something easy to get started. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Or do you want well, before we close, maybe just in closing, what any things that we didn't cover that you feel we should cover?
That's a very open question.
It's a very open for closing question.
Very, very open question. I mean, I think one of the things that would be interesting to say is, why write Mindful Empathy now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because not now, I've published it already. And a couple of years ago, we completed the digital version. And last year, we had the launch of the physical book. But why I wanted to write the connect mindfulness with empathy, or I was actually looking at mindfulness and emotional intelligence, but then empathy is such an important part that I thought, hey, this is great. And that's how we got together with Wayne, because he had studied empathy. He was interested in mindfulness. I was interested in connecting both. So that's how we easily connected and wrote, and it was a lovely experience. But the reason why is because there is more and more anxiety. Before, when I was young, like very, very young, it wasn't a common thing to travel that much. But with globalization, right, everyone is traveling, everyone is moving away from home and overseas. And we know what's going on in the whole world, and, even wars that are happening. And, we know what's going on, and global warming, et cetera, that there are more reasons to be anxious. So not only about your general everyday life, but there are things external and bigger, larger things that can make us anxious. And so I'm seeing more and more people who are going through transitions at work. They lost their job. So that's anxiety provoking, but they lost their jobs because now a robot does it. AI does it for them, right? And there's going to be more and more and more things that are replacing human beings in the workforce. So because of this, we really need to be smart about how we work. And I thought, okay, I've dealt with this from a young age, and I finally figured out how to get over my identity crisis that I had before, my anxiety issues. Not that I'm never anxious, but I have the tool now to relax, right? And it's like, people need this, and there's so much toxicity, and there's so many people who leave jobs because they're unhappy at work, because there's not good relationships. So that's where I thought I really need to write something and bring this tool, which is amazing, to people to read it, to digest it, to learn, to do little exercises. And if they want to go the full 9 yards, yes, see someone to help you through that, right? Through that anxiety, so you don't get defensive. And especially if you're a leader, I love working with managers, for instance, because sometimes there are little things that you can tweak that then start working well, right? Because maybe as a manager, you're too busy managing and forget to connect with people, and aren't aware of what's going on with you because you're looking outwardly, you know? So I found that this was something, and with COVID-19, we really hurried up because it was like, here's a lot of change. People are working from home, people are losing jobs, etc. So that's why in 2020, in May 2020, we released the digital copy. So that's the reason why we really wanted to get this out to people when they most need it.
Okay, so I'm hearing there is really you're seeing the anxiety in society going up, and that you've had experience with anxiety from an earliest age, and you found some tools and practices that have been helpful, and you're wanting to share those with people through the book and workshops and counseling type work. So, well, great. Well, that's the book that explains how to do that, the Mindful Empathy. And how do people get in contact with you? I see you have mindful-empathy.com is your website. Is that the main way to connect?
Yeah, they can write directly to me. My name is more of a challenge, so I also have a website that's for coaching, and that's called mindfullycoachme.com.
And I'll put all those links down below in the description so people will be able to get in contact with you. So thank you so much, Dani, for sending me the book. We sent it all the way from New Zealand, so it took a little while. And for talking and taking part in the empathy circles and joining me in this discussion. So thanks for that.
And one last thing is that at the moment I've got, I'm delivering the book for free for one coaching session.
Great. Check
so
that
that's
out.
on mindfullycoachme.com.
Great, thanks. Okay, let me hit